Hello and welcome to this video that is no doubt going to get us in trouble with our YouTube overlords. The various ways that YouTube is not just allowing, but in ways promoting pseudoscience, scams, fraud and poison sales. This might sound like some sort of, let's say, a dramatic entry into a terrible documentary about political families and their dark past, obscure alternative history timelines from World War II, or doomsday cults. But no, it is actually what's happening on YouTube today. As most people would know to some extent, YouTube is basically run on the good graces of Alphabet, or Google. Supposedly, YouTube itself doesn't turn a profit and therefore they must be supported by Google. That means that despite being force-fed 5 or more ads before, during and after a video, they still don't make enough money to run. That does mean that they just can't be kept afloat as is, and they are effectively kept afloat by Google putting money into it in order to dominate the video industry. But that also means they are relatively open to any video, whether it is a video of your cat just being in front of a camera, a guide to ancient and obscure video games, the most in-depth analysis of the weirdest thing ever, or just your average blog. Despite being very open, YouTube has always had some limited rules. At times, these rules have been tightened, and gradually that has become more serious. And this has come up in different ways. Either it is the adpocalypse, the sweeping censure of videos, or by the supposed enforcement of these policies. This last being the key tool that YouTube claims is what the platform is kept safe with. It is a combination of YouTube policies, community guidelines, terms of service, AI, and human moderation. For this video, we're going to focus primarily on the first two policies and how they come into play, mostly the policies and, as a consequence, community guidelines. The reason is simple. These are what generally cover the problems we will discuss: pseudoscience, scams, poisoning, etc. To start with, let's look at what YouTube allows in some history. That is more or less free expression. That means videos can be as plain and bland or vanilla, or as edgy and comedic as someone wants. This was and has been mostly tolerated as just that: humor, edginess and similar, or boring, dull and unexciting content. And not everything is to everybody's taste, but especially offensive or in any way specifically harmful or targeting content with malicious intent wasn't really a thing, and ultimately what was there was relatively neglected as people realized that it was just dumb. That's why, for the most part, this has historically been fine. The whole thing was, at least with YouTube at first, broadcast yourself. That meant any creator could make just about any video posted, and that was it. It was a window for people to shout out their thoughts to the internet and call it a day. And not quite Nietzsche's void, but then again it doesn't stare back either.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
That also means that any opinion, no matter how crass, distasteful, or appealing it was, it could be made known. And then we had things like the apocalypse, and then another later on, and this was followed things like, well, you had the child issues, and particularly the content related to that. When you had all these things come together, well, things went badly. For example, PewDiePie was accused of being racist for using the word nigger. There were hit pieces against YouTube from legacy media and claims of YouTube being a pathway for people to be funneled into the alt-right or far-right, and in some cases arguments that it was just a light right-wing commentary. And then we had the whole debacle as mentioned with kids and the various issues with advertisers, the children seeing inappropriate videos and the American government stepping in. That was a disaster for a time, as you will see. This is to an extent where and why YouTube started to really crack down on creators.
Alright, look, our policy is, if for any reason you're not completely satisfied, I hate you.
They brought in a series of successive rules, each of them more stringent over time. Now, initially, they were fairly simple and really just already good practice. The problem was that each time this sort of event occurred, YouTube cracked down harder with less flexibility and that meant more rules and more strict rules, with less nuanced interpretation or understanding for any kind of things that might happen. That means that any grey areas that existed weren't actually grey areas, it just meant if you were outside of a bright line, even if you weren't breaking the rules, you would be punished. It ultimately led to the formation of the YouTubers Union, which has gone basically nowhere, but it was enough of a wake-up call that YouTube decided to clarify these rules, guidelines, and so on, at least somewhat better. The same rules that have been successfully tightened again and again, like a noose. And it's very much how most creators see these, a hangman's noose. And that brings us to today. The community guidelines are the best and perhaps easiest example, mostly because it also covers the same content we'll be talking about shortly. The policies over spam, impersonation, fake engagement, nudities, thumbnail provocation stuff, inappropriate thumbnails, child safety, suicide, vulgar language, misinformation, election nonsense, health information, and so on. Think of a topic and there's a good chance one or more policies or community guidelines will apply to it. And there are several where it's not just the multiple policies covering it, but in contradictory ways, which is yet another issue we'll get to in due course. When you look at each of these policies in isolation, remembering they cover just about everything, they make sense. That's it. If you read through it, it says, this thing is not allowed. Easy enough. You look at that and you go, okay. If it says, do not use an altered image, or if you are, make sure to clearly identify it so people know that it's not real. Sure, that's easy to follow. For example, if I wanted to use a doctored photo, a deepfake video, or artificially generated audio and so on, this isn't hard. And obviously, with examples you see here, simple. It is kind of like treating the average viewer like a child, but unfortunately YouTube did go with the lowest common denominator option, which was sort of necessary after the various minefields perhaps better, rather than individual mines, they either walked into or more likely were thrown like a live hand grenade, which they caught from legacy media. Here is where things get kinda murky though. YouTube clearly says do not promote things like self-harm, drugs, guns, medical treatments that aren't real, stupid teenage TikTok challenges, and the list could go on, but you should probably get the idea by now. And basically, don't spread the dumb. The problem that we've found isn't how it works in theory, but how it works in practice. The writing is very clear. For example, don't spread these, or don't make content that promotes or glorifies it. But it's definitely not how it plays out in practice. What's supposed to happen, and again we're working in the theoretical framework here, is when something is possibly going to run afoul of these policies, YouTube doesn't have a human to figure this out. And they have what is supposed to be advanced algorithms that identify the topic, the content, and the problem when it comes to being matched against a policy. If that algorithm says it is bad, then YouTube pulls the video, so to say. They remove the video and it's no longer visible to anyone, even the creator. It's effectively deleted. Fortunately for creators, this is not the end of things. A creator can ask for a video be reviewed. And that means a decision by the algorithm can be fixed, at least by a human. But this brings us to the next issue. YouTube does not do this very well. They basically farm out the job to many companies who hire people to do this. They get given a rubric that says if these things are present, it's not okay, and the removal will stay. Basically a more in-depth version of the policies, but with a checklist attached. If the human reviewer sees this and finds a match, they pull the video anyway, or they maintain the decision to pull it. After this, there is basically no appeal path. You've been made to walk the plank. And unfortunately, this can also lead to strikes against the channel, particularly in the form of community guideline strikes. You get one warning and then 3 strikes. If you get 3 strikes, your channel is gone. The same sort of thing as with copyright issues. So this is not a good thing. When we talk about videos with clear violations, this is fine. It makes sense. For example, videos promoting self-harm obviously aren't good, and hopefully a human would find the same. The same with some other content, whether it's MMS or bleach and how people are told it's a panacea, and drinking it or doing enemas with it, and causing themselves great harm. Others that are basically having a chiropractor try and break your neck, which isn't good for anything. And in some instances, how poison will cure cancer. So yes, there is a cause for this to happen and why the checklists and systems exist. What is meant to happen though is if the algorithm doesn't work correctly. The human may find that what the algorithm thinks applies isn't true. That is, the video may not run afoul of the policy. This should be fed back into the algorithm that now knows that a particular thing in that context is not bad and therefore should not remove future videos. It's supposed to be part of a learning cycle. It's not, to be clear. YouTube may claim this, but we have never seen it be put into practice.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
This brings us to how YouTube is in practice as a result, and particularly around things like promoting pseudoscience, scams, and poisoning. It is important to understand what is supposed to happen, as we've described, versus what does happen, because the results we see from YouTube are not just completely contradictory to the policies.
Regulation 2. You for an emergency sort and file under Regulation 2. Don't quote me, regulations. I co-chaired the committee that reviewed the recommendation to revise the color of the book that regulation's in.
And particularly the community guidelines, but the ultimate effect is worse again. Let us use a simple example. The YouTube policy on harmful and dangerous content or health misinformation. We recently had a run-in with this, and it's a relatively clear set of categories for videos that promote, say, a product called amygdalin. This is also properly called late trial when synthesized in vitamin B17 when sold as a scam. This is because amygdalin forms cyanide when metabolized by the human body. For those unaware, cyanide is very poisonous and therefore not a cure for anything except life. As such, a video talking about it, as we were, was pointing out that, well, no, this is a dangerous thing, you shouldn't be taking it. And as we ourselves found out, YouTube doesn't really care about debunking if it's pseudoscience, scam, or poison. In fact, its status is largely irrelevant for us. Instead, YouTube would rather keep up videos that promote it as a cure for cancer, among other things. Yeah. YouTube's policy, remember, health misinformation, is being applied to remove content that highlights how dangerous something is and it doesn't work as intended, or at least as it's sold. Understand very clearly, the policy, as it is written, says that a video cannot and should not promote amygdalin as a cure for anything. One of them explicitly calls out amygdalin. Our video explaining why amygdalin is dangerous and a scam or fraud was taken down. At the same time as that happened, videos that claim amygdalin is a cure that is being hidden from people are kept up and freely accessible because YouTube thinks they're okay.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
YouTube literally suppresses, and in this case literally removes videos trying to promote factual information that could prevent poisoning. YouTube keeps up fake scam and poison along with pseudoscience videos. These are things that diametrically and completely oppose the purpose of the written words in the policies, and particularly the health misinformation policies. Frustratingly for us, that is not the only example. We also had a video of ours titled "Vaccines Are Safe" removed. A video all about the common misconceptions of vaccine content, effects, and side effects removed for, guess what? Health misinformation. Giving YouTube the benefit of the doubt, you might think, okay, maybe there was an issue. Not really. The closest thing was explaining that thimerosal, or mercury as anti-vaxxers call it, was only in a few select vaccines, and almost none that are given to children, and of those that are given to children, non-thimerosal containing versions are available. We also debunked the connection between vaccines and autism, natural versus vaccine-mediated immunity, and more. Nothing groundbreaking or amazing, just simple, solid, and reliable factual information. And it was all backed up with the appropriate peer-reviewed resources, so it was basically a cited work. Yet it was health misinformation. Yeah.
Alright, look, our policy is, if for any reason you're not completely satisfied, I hate you.
While our video is taken down, YouTube will keep up anti-vaxxer videos and documentaries. The content built on little more than wishful thinking in most cases, and in other cases, grossly misunderstood research, and in other cases again, research that is just plain scandalous. In doing so, YouTube does promote anti-vaxxer sentiment and beliefs while suppressing anything pro-vaccine or factual. The jewel of YouTube's crown, so to say, in this regard, is conspiracy theories.
And I'm not saying people didn't naturally have homosexual feelings. I'm not even getting into it. Quite frankly, I mean, give me a break. You think I am like, shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Serious crap.
YouTube seems to go out of its way to bend over backwards in order not to take down conspiracy theory videos, especially some of the more dangerous or egregious examples, such as 5G causing this, that, or the other disease, condition, or other vague malaise, and this has led to real-world harm. For example, people burning down 5G towers. Understand, this is not an insignificant problem, not least of which that you are literally depriving people of their phone connection in some cases, and therefore access to emergency services, but more importantly, it is a conspiracy theory. The best part of all of this so far is that YouTube actually has a mechanism in their policy for allowing content to stand if, and this is a big if, it runs afoul of the policies, but only when it is educational, documentary, scientific, or artistic. 4 criteria. That is, there is a way for YouTube to clearly say, oh, this is definitely against our policy, but you are making art, explaining it, giving historical, cultural, etc. context to the understanding, or something similar. Therefore, we will let it stay up. And the problem is that the content YouTube lets stay up isn't this kind, or at least not this kind if you take it at its actual value. It is very much a content selection process that the policy was intended to stop happening. And unfortunately, because it's content that the policy is supposed to clearly rule out, and yet YouTube allows it, we have a problem. It is almost like YouTube is actively writing the policy to just appease advertisers, and by saying, look, we have this thing, these are our rules. Don't we look great and wonderful? Don't you want to give us money so you can advertise on these videos? But then when YouTube actually puts this in practice, they randomly enforce the policy however they see fit, with absolutely no reference to the decision-making process, nor the policy as they've written it. Which is bad. Again, this should be an obvious thing, but the problem isn't just that it's bad. The major problem in the end is going to be for creators on top of the audience. We can't know if we actually need to follow the written policy, or some other weird version of it that we have and probably will never see, in order to be compliant. Yep. That's the issue here. The actual written policies are at times completely contradictory to what's happening. And given that we run the risk of, for example, losing our channel if we were to get 3 strikes for a policy that is not being followed by YouTube, that is an issue. For the viewer, it is much worse. YouTube is actively removing content that either informs or in the best case scenario, protects the viewer from things that are dangerous. It's the idea of forewarned is forearmed, or knowledge is power. And knowing that a thing a snake oil salesman is trying to sell you is dangerous and will not prevent you from becoming ill and is instead a scam or trick, will mean you don't get scammed or tricked. It will stop you from buying a pseudoscientific bullshit device and get actual real treatment. It will mitigate the events where someone is told that a particular thing will be a panacea that cures every problem they have, and when in fact it is poison of one kind or another. The biggest issue for us though is that there is clearly written policies for most every example we can come up with, and yet every example, no matter how clearly in violation of the policy, remains there.
Alright, look, our policy is, if for any reason you're not completely satisfied, I hate you.
Even when you advise YouTube, these videos are here, despite the fact that, as you have said, they're against the policy. Why are they still here? YouTube will leave them be. And these things have remained there for a long time. It's why we've been waiting to make this video. And the fact they've been there for so long, and YouTube has known about them for so long, means that they have no intention to act. It's very obvious, since by now, the policies make clear that they should have been removed. But no, YouTube is keeping content that is obviously not supposed to be, an action that happens repeatedly and hurts both creators and the audience. And this is not a new event either, and while this is towards the end of the video, understand that it's an important example I need to bring up. Other creators have seen the same thing, where videos they have made have been given grossly and extremely different treatment because it's them versus someone else, despite it being exactly the same content in some extreme cases, such as those related to video games. And as such, a cutscene in a video game does not change no matter who's presenting it, and yet individuals or creators will be given different treatment by YouTube, and oftentimes, for smaller creators like us, a very adversarial and adverse treatment. For example, the community guideline strikes, where, as mentioned, if these things keep going, we run the risk of losing our channel, not because we've done something wrong, but because we've followed the written policy from YouTube and tried to do the right thing by providing information that is of benefit to people, so they understand that something is either not dangerous in the case of vaccines, or is dangerous in the case of amygdalin. And in the case of other creators again, they've just been given the short and pointy end of a stick after it was covered in shit by YouTube. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.